Hey there, kiddos. Welcome back. Hopefully, chapters 1 through 5 helped as far as the YouTube videos are concerned. If they didn't, I'm sorry. Let me know how they can help better. In the meantime, I have found a little more of my, I had to dig deep and found some more of my computer skills that I didn't realize I had. So basically I've got a way to where I can now share with you my screen. These would be the slides that I would use in class if it were a lecture. Um, so this is just the abbreviated group of slides, and of course, um, the full PowerPoint presentations will be available on Canvas. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll get into Chapter 6, which is the first 2 years of cognitive development. So here we go. Here's what I'm looking at. So first 2 years cognitive development. So we're talking about cognitive, which is the brain. Sensory motor intelligence. Piaget was one of the forerunners of the forefathers of the studying of kiddos, especially in stages. Of course, you got Freud who did his, but Maslow did the hierarchy, but Piaget did a great deal of studying of the younger kiddos anyway. So the first thing is the sensory motor. That's the term he used for the way infants think, using their senses, their motor skills, as best they can. Their senses, we all know when we're hungry. We all know when we're cold. We all know when, we need to, go to the restroom. So, and when we're little, we have very little motor skills. So we do what we can. So with little ones, it's the fists, it's the feet, and then of course once they learn to walk, then there's that. So that's how kiddos interpret their world and how they interact with their world. Piaget also said, infants are very active learners, and adaptation is really at the core of all intelligence, because we know that as individuals, we do have to adapt to our environment. And then he said that cognition develops in 4 distinct periods. Sensory motor intelligence, and we'll get to those 4 types in a little bit. But the sensory motor intelligence that Piaget mentioned was assimilation, to interpret new experiences are interpreted to fit into old ideas. That's assimilation. Accommodation. Old ideas are restructured to include new experiences. So very similar, but very distinct. So assimilation, new experiences assimilated with old ideas. Accommodation are old ideas accommodating new experiences, right? Reflexes. Infants adapt reflexes through information from repeated responses. They know that they know very, very, very early that when they're hungry, that information has to do with their mouth. So that's why the hand goes to the mouth, because they know that's the way. And when moms or anybody sees babies with their hands in their mouth, they're like, okay, are they hungry? Are they, when they get a little older, are they teething? So that's a reflex that helps them tell us what they need. Goal-directed behavior, purposeful actions that benefit from new motor skills resulting from brain maturation. So when babies learn to do something, it's, especially with socks. My kids were never, ever sock kids. Even now, they're really not sock kids. So of course, in Florida, even in this, I have 2 summer babies and 1 winter baby. And, even my summer baby or even my winter baby didn't like socks. So one of the first things my kids learned to do was take their socks off if they didn't like it. So they knew that they knew how to eliminate that very uncomfortable feeling, learning to take off socks. So goal-directed behavior. I'm purposely taking off my socks because I now have the ability to, because my brain is now telling me I can, you know, or I'm through with my dinner plate, so I'm going to throw it across the room. Yeah, no, absolutely aggravating, but there's a point and purpose behind it. And then then the next is object permanence. Why babies think peekaboo is so amazing, because it's like you're gone and now you're back, and then you're gone and then you're back. Some kids love it because it's a surprise. Mom's gone, mom's back. Other kids will cry. You know, mom's gone, I'm gonna cry. Mama's back, I'm excited, right? So realizing that just because something just something that they can't see doesn't mean it's gone. Because you can't see it doesn't mean it's gone. So object permanence. Pretty easy. Piaget is a kind of a recap. Many infants reach stages of sensory motor earlier than Piaget predicted, meaning babies are a little smarter than we thought. They learn quicker than we thought, and they're learning things earlier than we thought. And it really, I mean, the sad part of being a parent for me was realizing that my babies were only babies for a few weeks. And then as soon as they started to, accomplish things, first it was, picking up the head. And then it was all about, okay, now what can I do to help them pick up the head and make those neck muscles stronger? And then they rolled over. And then, how can I get them to roll over from front to back and then back to front? And then, so once they started to do one thing, all the other milestones came very quickly thereafter. So don't underestimate kiddos, but that also means that, they're learning from us a lot earlier than we thought. So information, so we're trying to, we think we're being sneaky, but, they're watching and they're learning, even well before we thought they would. So information processing, basically our brains process information pretty much the same way a computer does. It's a step-by-step description of the mechanisms of thought. Basically, step 1 leads to step 2, which leads to step 3, which leads to step 4. Kind of like math. If you theoretically speaking, if you can add 1 and 1, then you can subtract 2, 1 minus 2, then you can multiply, then you can divide, and then everything from that is just a mechanism of step one after the other. And so Piaget says that thought is the same way, or that incremental development is the same way. It's step by step by step. And then through every age, we're understanding and we're figuring out why something works. And when we figure out why something works, if we want it to continue to work, we know how then to make it. If I'm, like I said, with my kids and their socks, if they didn't want socks on, it didn't take them long to figure out how to take them off. Once they took them off, if they didn't want them on, they took them off, right? So it's that, motor skill versus the, motor skill being used in conjunction with that cognitive maturity. And it helps, connect two parts of the brain, being able to think something and then being able to do it, and then being able to think it enough to do it. The next, from here, the textbook goes into the visual cliff. And you can see right here the visual cliff. Now, all of this is one solid piece. It's like plexiglass here. But what the difference is the plexiglass is laid on a table. And then where the table ends, the plexiglass will then continue on, so that baby is looking down at what they call a visual cliff, which means it looks like the table has ended. Now, most babies, as you can see here, once they realize that, or once they think they can see that the floor ends, they'll stop, because they're still trying to learn that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. But even as adults, I mean, I've had the opportunity to go to buildings that have the glass floors, and it is freaky as all get out when you're standing, 23 stories up and you're looking down, and the only thing that's protecting you from the ground is, a quarter inch or half inch thick plexiglass. It's very daunting. So even as adults, we still deal with the experiences of the visual cliff. We know, that it's been there for, years and nobody's fallen through. And just because I step on it isn't going to break it. But the fact is, I can see through it, which doesn't make any sense. But over time, as kiddos repeat actions, these actions are going to be embedded in their memory. And the way, at least with little ones, the way that memory is built is through repetition, repetition, repetition. And then if they forget, it's like if you've ever seen watched a kid do a play. My daughter did a play at the end of her first semester at school after the second quarter. She did a play with her drama friends, and they put on the play for the families to see. So as my daughter was going through the play, when she was interacting with one of the other characters, he had forgotten his lines, so she's prompting him. And so sometimes when we forget, we can use those prompts, any type of retrieval cue, which will help. So so that's one of the ways we teach babies is, how many is this? Well, if they're looking at you like, well, I don't know. Well, if this is 1, then what does that make this? And they're like, oh, okay, that's 1. That means this is 2. So eventually they don't have to go 1, 2. They can simply go, oh, that's 2. Oh, that's 4. Right? Per Freud, and even we're finding this somewhat, as far as memories go, why most of us have our first memories are around the age of 3 or 4, give or take, depending, is that the brain is still connecting, it's still building those connections, those neural connections in the brain. And so the brain isn't developed enough to be able to hang on to those memories from that first year. So now, that being said, an infant can tell the difference between, if an infant is breastfed, an infant can tell the difference between their mother's breast milk and somebody else's breast milk. Now, is that a type of learning? I think so. Voices familiar. Mother's voice, if kiddos are upset, sometimes mother's voices can soothe. Why? Because they remember that, from the womb. Also, I don't know if they still have them or not, but when my kids were little, they had a teddy bear, it's like a heartbeat teddy bear. And it was just a stuffed animal, but inside that stuffed animal was a little speaker. You could turn it on, and it sounded like the heartbeat from inside the womb. And if my kids were fussy, sometimes that actually helped. So, do they have memories? Can they think of things when they get older? Maybe not. But there's some type of learning that goes on in their core. Excuse me. That helps to, there's some type of learning or some type of memory that's going on because they can tell the difference between one voice and another, one food and another, right? Memory, as infants are learning, okay, they can remember things that are similar to real life. Um, you know, if you're trying to tell a story, they may not necessarily remember the story, but if the story in and of itself is similar to what their life is like, then they're going to be able to remember that story. They're also going to be able to remember something if it's high motivation. If they're motivated to do something, they're motivated to remember something. You know, if they know that, you know, if they want that stuffed animal badly enough, they're going to remember what corner of the crib mom keeps it in. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and I want my bear, hopefully I can remember which corner it is so I can go get it, right? And then of course, sometimes even with adults, memory retrieval, sometimes we need extra help, and that's okay. You know, whether especially if it's something that's not very meaningful to us, sometimes we'll need that extra help, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we're forgetful. It just means that there's no motivation there. There's nothing that excites me enough to remember it. Most of you guys, that's school, right? You remember something long enough to get through your exam, and then that's it. Nothing else after that. So reminders, so reminder session, basically when it's our reminder session, it's just, you know, introducing information to a kiddo, waiting a little while, and then asking that kiddo for information. And if they can't, you know, then give them the hint, give them whatever it is they need. And then a little later on, you'll repeat that reminder. And every time you're reminding them of something, every time you're, you know, like with, you know, teaching kids their telephone number, you know, if you ever get, I mean, most kids now, crazy, have cell phones, so you don't have to remember the cell phone number, or they don't have to remember a telephone number because it's in their cell phone. But I always make my kids memorize the telephone number, because just in case they were somewhere that they didn't have a cell phone, or their cell phone died or whatever, I made them memorize my cell phone number and their dad's cell phone number. So you know, even though your infants don't need to know a cell phone number or can't use a cell phone number, okay, you know, you still need to. That the whole point though is to repeat and repeat and remind and remind, and then repeat and remind. And then of course it says the last point is context is crucial, especially for infants younger than 9 months. You know, again, that goes back to, you know, even though, you know, infants at 9 months can't talk, you know, but when you're trying to teach them something, you know, stuffed animals, you know, if you want to teach them their hand, you know, and contact your hand, you don't want to go, okay, what's this? Oh, this is a hand. Oh, what's this? This is a cup. No, it's, you know, because one has nothing to do with the other. You know, you want the hand, the elbow, the eye, the nose, the mouth, the head, right? So all about context. So as long as everything is kind of related, it's easier for kiddos to remember what they're trying to remember. So language development before birth, you know, again, like I said a minute ago, kiddos can hear before they're born. And when they're newborn, they prefer the sounds that they heard when they were in the womb. Even though they don't understand language, they are going to prefer, if a kiddo was raised, you know, or if a kiddo, you know, while their mom was pregnant with them, if mom spoke English, then they're going to prefer that English. They're going to prefer things that are comfortable, because what happens is, you know, if, you know, for whatever reason, if a kiddo's heart rate starts to increase, mom can talk, or if mom, because some things mom does can cause baby's heart rate to increase. So, you know, if when kiddos get excited, you talk to them, and then they kind of calm down. And then around 6 months, they're going to be able to distinguish sounds, and then gestures, and then in their own language, they're going, you know, they're going to be able to, you know, mom and dad, blah, blah, whatever, you know, so they're going to be able to distinguish sounds and gestures in their own language. Um, you know, teaching kiddos a different language is going to pop up in a couple of chapters. The first part of language development is babbling. Like I said, with the ba ba ba, which babies begin to enunciate between 6 and 9 months old. And then by the time they're 12 months old, they can say things that kind of sort of sound like their own language, or their native language. If if their language is English, mama, dada, things like that. And then of course, as they get older, words are going to become more clear. Then the words are going to become sentences, and then sentences are going to become thought, and then thought becomes into a whole different process. So, but how do kiddos communicate if they can't speak? Oh my gosh, there's the pointing, right? We gesture. Kiddos understand concepts with gestures, and these gestures these gestures are used earlier than speech, which is why if kiddos are having trouble speaking, infant sign language is amazing. My youngest took a little longer to speak than the other two did. And so what we would notice when she was wanting something, she was getting frustrated because we would go down to a list of what she was trying to point at. And so it was frustrating to her because we didn't understand what she was saying. It was frustrating to us because we can't fix that frustration for her. So somebody suggested we teach her sign language. And I was like, oh, nothing huge, but things like, I'm thirsty, I want something to drink, or I want a cookie, or I want more. Do you like this? Yes, I want more. So little things like that, so that they can kind of communicate basic concepts. So at least it reduces that stress on both parents and kiddos. So how does language work? By about 1 year, they can speak some words. Between 6 and 15 months, they can understand 10 times more words than they can produce, meaning they may not be able to say no, but they can understand no. They may not be able to say, Mommy, I'll be right back, but they understand, when Mama says, I'll be right back, they know Mom's going to leave and then come back. By 12 months, they begin to use holophrases, recognizing vocalization from universal to language specific. Okay, basically, they're going to be able to understand, the basics of language. And then eventually, when they start to speak and then they get on a roll, they're going to, their vocabulary is going to reach about 500 words. Vocabulary meaning what they can say. And then it builds from 50 to 100 words per month once they learn to speak well. So that by the time a kiddo is 21 months old, they will be able to say twice as many words as they did when they were 18 months old. So yeah, my grandmother used to tell me, the first 2 years of my life, she taught me to walk and talk. And then she spent the rest of my life telling me to sit down and shut up. And so this is why, because in those first few months, babies learn once they start to speak. It takes them a while to get there, but once they get there, then it's like, boom. And it's just like that incremental development. And it's just every time, when it doubles, it just gets bigger and bigger, quicker and quicker. How one speaks is going to be defined by your culture. Infants are going to gravitate towards the people that they can communicate with the best, right? And then music tempo, depending on the type of culture, your music tempo is going to be different, okay? When you're learning in and of itself, as far as language is concerned, you know, outside of outside of the ages, you know, different cultures have different ways to speak. You know, in the States, you know, if we're talking about something, a car, we're talking about the red car. But in other languages, it's the car that's red, you know, so more words in the other language. So the ratio of nouns and verbs and adjectives are going to vary depending on which culture the kiddo is part of. And I did know one time you know, I had a friend who their kiddo, or the one parent was Hispanic and one parent was English speaking. And so the kiddo was learning kind of both languages at once. And, you know, one day the kid went up to one of the grandmothers and asked, I want to go to the Big Agua. And they're trying to figure out the Big Agua, you know, the Big Agua means the pool, big water, lots of water, bigger than the bathtub. So kiddos are sensitive to the sounds of words. And so once they are able to repeat it, then it becomes, you know, they're going to adapt to whatever language they're a part of. All right, and video. Since language learning is crucial, many parents hope to accelerate such learning by using videos. But the thing is, what happens if we introduce our kiddo to too much video stimulation, then what's going to happen is that prefrontal cortex is going to become overactive, and again, that immediate gratification. Not adrenaline, but I can't think of the chemical right now, but basically it's that, you know, we get that immediate gratification. So sometimes videos may not necessarily be the best thing, you know, but that doesn't keep companies from saying, hey, you know, use this to help your kid speak, use this to help your kid read. But what actually works is the best thing to do is for mom or dad or whomever to sit down and actually read with the child. And of course, you know, having that face-to-face time really helps a kiddo learn to kind of relate more to people as a whole, right? All right, so sweet. So that is that chapter. I will make sure I'll get this up. All of the chapter homework is already up. Of course, this is an abbreviated PowerPoint presentation. The full PowerPoint presentation is available to you. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, you guys stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.